thanks once again for joining me here at Lisa Horton Crafts. Okay, let's make a start then, shall we? So this is the card we're aiming for today. It's a window panel card and we're using a sheet of acetate to give us our window here. Okay, the size of the card doesn't really matter. It's whatever size your acetate sheet happens to be. Now mine happened to be this sort of size, which is about I think it's 15 centimeters wide, and I just went with the length because it sort of fits an 8x8 card depth wise, but I will trim the end off when I come to it. And I will just say about the acetate, on Monday's live I was talking about cutting with acetate and using a really thin acetate because you're cutting through the acetate and the card, so you need something that's a little bit thinner. With this sort of card you need something that's quite sturdy, so you can see the difference here between these two. This is a really rigid acetate and this is really flimsy. This isn't going to give your card any rigidity at all, so when you come to stand it up it's just gonna flop. So you need something with a little bit more sturdiness to it. Okay, so that's why we're using a thicker acetate today. So let's just quickly run through what we're going to be using, and then we're going to do the stenciling just to show you. Today's is going to look a little bit different to the one I did for the sample, because I'm using slightly different colours. So I'm using the beautiful Peony Rose stem, embossing folder, stencils and die. And I just think these stencils are so clever. Combined with the Ultimate, they take all the faff out of layering your stencils, don't they? They make it so easy. You haven't got to stop and line things up with little holes and things. I think it's amazing. So that's what we're using, layering stencils wise and embossing folder wise. Then on yesterday's card, the sample that I made, I used a stamp from it's the Little Things Scripted Sentiments, and I've used A Little Hello Sent With Love, which you can see I've put inside. Okay, so today's card I'm using the other Scripted Sentiments set, which is the Believe in Yourself, and I'm using was it Make Yourself a Priority? Yeah, Make Yourself a Priority. And part of the reason I'm using that is because it fits in this space here quite nicely, because some of them are a little bit long for the card that I'm doing. I think they're all amazing, and I just love the font in this. I love the two types of font in one stamp. I think it's amazing. So I'm using that Make Yourself a Priority today, and then I'm using the Christmas Romance paper pad, one of my most favourite paper pads that Lisa's ever bought out. Again, I wanted to show you that although it's a Christmas pad, you don't have to make a Christmas card, because there's no way you'd say this was a Christmas card, is it? So I just wanted to show you that as well today. So those are the papers I'm using. And then I'm using the nested, scalloped and stitched rectangles purely and simply to give me my inside here. Okay, where I'm going to put my little stamped sentiment. Okay, let's do the stenciling first, and then we'll move on to make the actual card. Because the stenciling is so quick with this system, it just takes no time at all. So I just thought I would go through, do the stenciling, and just show you how quickly it is. So colours then. For the leaves, I wanted to use speckled egg. On this one I used salvaged patina, and what I was trying to do was get the colours to sort of match in with the colours on the paper as near as possible. I mean, it's quite impossible, if I'm honest, because I have no idea what colours they really are, but I wanted the flower to stand out but blend in at the same time. Because I used salvage patina on those, I'm using speckled egg today because I just think it will give me a softer colour. Alright, now I'm using the stencil brushes, so I'm getting rid of some of the ink onto my stencil first before I go into the actual apertures. because I really don't want this colour to be too heavy to start with. I can add colour as I go along, but I don't want it to be really, really heavy. Okay, so that's the base colour. I don't know what I'm putting the lid on for, because I am going to use it again in a second. But before I take this off, I am just going to go around the edge with shaded lilac, only very slightly. I'm just going to use a smallish brush for this, because I only want to go right on the edge of these leaves, just to give those edges a little bit of definition. Now, there's no right or wrong way to this at all. It's purely personal choice. You do exactly what you want in the way you want to do it. You're only limited by your own imagination. So just go with the flow. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a piece of card, isn't it? And if you're making a mistake in your eyes, don't think you ever make mistakes, you can only learn from it, can't you? So I think that'll do. I'm not going to do these, just the main leaves. Okay, so that's number 1. Yes, I like that. Then we're going to go in with number 2. Again, popping it onto the peg system. Absolutely perfect. No lining up, no messing about. Just brilliant. So I'm going in with speckled egg again, but I am going quite heavy this time, because I want these veins to stand out. Okay, and you'll notice that I'm doing circular movements instead of strokes, because I feel, again, my own personal feelings, is that if you go around in a circular motion, your ink will fill those apertures better than if you try and do sort of brush strokes. That's just my feelings. Okay, so that's number 2. Yeah, happy with that, like that. Okay, so then we're coming on to the flowers, and these are the base of the flowers. Now I'm going with tattered rose on the base of these, because as I said to you before, I don't use tattered rose very much, and I don't know why, because it is really a beautiful, beautiful colour. Okay, so that's the tattered rose that we've added on. Alright, I'm not going to go around the edges of the petals yet. I might come back and do that afterwards. I'll see how I feel when I finish the rest of it. Okay, now when I did yesterday's for my sample, I went in here with tattered rose again, and the flower for me turned out to be a little bit too peachy. So I'm going a bit bolder today, and I'm going to use saltwater taffy, just to give me a different sort of a look. It is still a peachy pink, but I am going to get over that in a little while. So going in with the saltwater taffy. Don't need to go too hard, because it is a different colour to my base layer. Whereas when I did the leaves, I actually went in quite hard with the second layer, because it was the same colour and I wanted it to stand out. So the heavier you go with your ink, the more your stenciling will stand out. Okay, just have a look. Yes, I'm happy with that. Okay, now we're going with the detail on the flowers. Now I'm going with worn lipstick on here, because I want to just lift away from the peach and add in a little bit of pink. So I'm going with my worn lipstick on this one, because for me, I feel that worn lipstick is sort of in a similar family to the other two, the tattered rose and the saltwater taffy. So, and again, I'm taking off some of the ink first, because I don't want to go in too heavy to start with. Okay, so gently does it at first. You can always go back and go heavier. I'm going to leave that at that. I'm going to take my ink off my stencil rather than off my ink pad, just so that I'm not tempted to put too much ink on this first layer, because I've got more detail to add in a second. So So if I take my ink off here, then I know I'm not going to put too much. Yeah, happy with that. And then finally, the last little bit of detail. Now this bit in the middle is my seed heads, so I'm just going to go in with tea dye there, just to make it a little bit of a different colour. And I am just dabbing here, because these holes are quite tiny, so if you dab you'll get more ink through. Yeah, like that, happy with that. Leave that at that, that's that one. And then I'm going back in with this worn lipstick. And again, you can go heavier on this one because it's the last layer if you want, or do it a similar sort of depth to the colour that you put down on the last lot of detail. But I quite like this a bit heavier, because I just want to lift this when I come to die cut it and emboss it, which I won't be doing on this one today because I've already done one ready, because the die cutting and the embossing just take up those few extra minutes that I don't have. But obviously you could do that at home, so I'll just check that. Yes, I'm happy with that. And I think I will just excuse me, go ahead and just add in that little bit of shaded lilac just around the edge of the flowers, just to lift the edges a little bit. Not a great deal, just enough to give a little bit of definition to the edges of those flowers. Okay, yeah, happy with that. So you can see how quick that was, how easy it was to line it up with that fabulous peg system. And then all you would do is add your dye on the top, line it up, tape it down, run it through your die cutting machine, and then stick it inside your embossing folder and emboss it. Okay, show you the one that I've already done ready for today. So you can see that again it's quite different to the one I did yesterday. There's more pink in this one, whereas with the one I did yesterday it's a lot more peachy. So I've used the same sets of colours, just in different strengths and different depths, just so that, you know, that it just changes the look of the flower completely. Okay, so I'll put that to one side. I will use that on another card. So let's get to making the actual card. So as I said, I've started with an 8x8 card blank, and I've cut it down like this. So I've cut the side off so that the width of my card is 14.8 centimetres wide, or 5 13/16. I know that sounds faffy, but it isn't really. And then I've cut this panel out. So my top panel is 3 1/4 inches, which is 8.3 centimetres. And my bottom panel is 2 1/2 inches, which is 6.4 centimetres. Okay, now that's my template, and this is what you end up with. So I've cut the side off, I've cut the top panel, I've cut the panel out of the middle, so I've got a top panel and a bottom panel. Okay, so those are your measurements. You can pause, when you play back you can pause it and just write those down. But that's the basis of my card. Okay, so if I just get rid of that one, I'll take my piece of acetate, and I'm only going to adhere it in one place. So what I would do is put my acetate down on the back of the card. And I don't usually use red liner tape because it does have a tendency to dry out, and you know, nobody wants the tape to dry out and your card fall apart. But in this instance it really is the best option. So I'm placing my red liner tape right up at the top by the crease of the card. Make sure you're not on the crease, otherwise your card won't fold properly. Okay, so I've just snipped that at the edge there, and this edge here. Get rid of that. Okay, so that's my first piece, and I'm going to leave my acetate down here straight, Make sure it's clean, by the way, because you want your acetate to be clean so that you can see your sentiment through the acetate, and it does actually provide you with a window, not a dirty window. And then just close the top down onto your acetate like so, and then just burnish it so that you're actually helping that red liner tape adhere to your acetate. Now I'm not putting tape here because my flower is going to give me that security of my flap not lifting all the time. All right, so then we're going to add the bottom piece, the bottom panel. All right, now I'm adding the tape to the card, not the acetate, purely and simply so that I know I've got the red liner tape right at the bottom of my card. And when you open this card, yes, you can see the tape a bit, but to be honest, I really don't think it really makes that much difference, because nobody's going to be looking at the top of the card, they're going to be looking at the front of the card. Now this red liner tape wants to go at the bottom here, so I'm lining up my white panel with the back of the card. My tape sticking out, and when I'm happy that it's in the right place, we take the tape off and then just burnish that down like that. So now I've got my card attached to my acetate, and it just lifts slightly at the front. It's not going to make a difference, it really won't, I promise. And then I'm just going to trim the bottom of the acetate. You can hear how thick it is, can't you? Okay, just get rid of that. So that's the basis of my card made. All right, then I'm just going to add some papers to the front. Now I said to you I was using the Christmas Romance. I've used the same sheet as I did on the original, and I've left the tiniest white border around the paper. I could have gone all the way to the edge, but personally I think it looks better with a little bit of a white border. So that's all I've done is just measured that panel and just cut my paper slightly smaller. That's all. I haven't sort of written down any measurements, just sort of done it as I've gone along really. So I've got a tiny weeny border all the way around there. A little bit overzealous with my glue there, which you don't need to be with Lisa's glue because it's amazing. And then put my panel on the bottom as well, like so. Don't really need the glue in the middle, but I like to be sure. And you'll notice that, though I didn't check, so I'm very lucky, I've put the roses so the roses are the right way up, because I didn't want them to be upside down. So when I cut the paper, I made sure that when I cut the piece, I'd got roses on the pieces that I'd cut, so that it matched in with the rose on here. Okay, so my flower is going there, so it's going across the panel. All right, but let's just do the inside before we add that flower. So on the inside, I've just cut a piece of contrasting paper from the same set. Now on this one I used the brown, but the same design, just to pick out the browns in the cones really. But I thought on this one I'd go with the green to try and pick out the leaves on the front. And again, I've left a white border all the way around this because I just think it sets it off really nicely. Okay, and then I've cut the largest rectangle, the scallop on the rectangles, to put inside so that I can stamp my sentiment on the inside. So if I just add this down as well, and I'm not putting glue right in the middle of this because I don't want it to spoil the lie of the paper. You know, sometimes you can get like a little bubble in your glue and it stands out a mile. It doesn't matter how much you smooth it down, it just stands out. So I've not put any glue in the middle. Okay, so I'm putting my flower down before I put my sentiment down, because I want my flower in place to make sure that I don't stamp my sentiment in the wrong place. Okay, now to adhere this, I'm using 3D pads because I want this to sit a little bit proud. I don't want it completely flat on the card. Okay, so I've already put my pads down, and the only thing you've got to make sure of is that you can't see any pads after you've put your flower down on the front of your card. So when you lift it, you don't want to be able to see any pads from this side. So you just need to bear that in mind when you're adding your pads to your embossed flower, which I did. So I already tested it, she said, hopefully. So I make sure that my flower, I'm coming in a little bit from the edge, not too much. So I add my flower down here and my flower heads up there. So there's nothing gluing this here because you don't want that to show on the other side. Now you can see, you can't see any glue pads on the other side of that. Phew. Okay, so the last little thing I need to do is just stamp my sentiment here. Now, in order to line it up, I would do it like this to make sure. See, I know now that if I line this up with the edge of that scallop there, it's going to sit in the right place. You're going to be able to read all the sentiment. If I just lift it up slightly, can you see that better? So if I line that up with the edge of that scallop on that rectangle, it's going to line up perfectly. Okay, so I don't need to worry about, just make sure I've got the right scallop, obviously, because there's quite a few. So I'm just going to put a little pencil mark on the scallop that I want, leave that open, ink this up, and as I say, I just think these sentiments with the script and the ordinary type, I just think look really lovely. So I know I've got the right scallop because I put a little pencil mark on it, and hopefully it's going to be straight. I'm not going to look over the top of it because you don't really want to see the top of my head. And then stamp that down. Leave it down a couple of seconds just for the ink to transfer to your paper. And lift away. Beautiful. So now, if I just rub that pencil mark out there, and I close my window, I've got my sentiment on the inside and my flower on the outside. And I just think it looks a little bit different, a little bit special, and it just stand out from the crowd. So if you're sending that for a birthday card and you want to put a birthday sentiment in it, I just think yours, oh, glass domes, need to finish it off properly, don't I? I thought about this after I'd done the card yesterday and thought, oh yes, mustn't forget that. So I went with the really large dome on the one that I did yesterday, but I'm going with smaller ones today. So I used a large and a small, but today I'm using 2 small, just because so it looks a little bit different, I suppose. So just get my pokey tool out and put them where I want them. And I love these because I just think very cleverly they just seem to pick up the colour on the background papers that you're using, and I just think that's really clever considering they've got a white back to them. I think the way they pick the colours up on the card is really, really clever. So small bit of glue, and as I say, you don't really need huge amounts of glue with this because it's so good and it adheres so well that it just does what it's supposed to do. Okay, so I'm doing them opposites to what I've done at the top, and I don't know whether you noticed, but on my pokey tool and my pickup tool, I've differentiated between the ends. So I've put a dot on the end of the pokey tool and a circle on the end of the pickup tool. So every time I pick it up, I automatically know which end I'm going to be taking the top off. Just saves a couple of seconds, and when you're in a rush, sometimes that couple of seconds just makes all the difference, doesn't it? So there you go. There's the 2 cards that I've done, and as I say, I will use the other peony rose stem that I've done on another card at some point. Okay, so there you go, 2 beautiful cards, and I just think they stand out from the crowd a little bit. If you find your acetate's got some marks on it, if you just use a wet cloth and just wipe it gently and then polish it off with the dry part of the cloth, your acetate will come clean, and it'll look super spectacular then. Okay, so there you go. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for joining me once again, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Take care of yourselves and each other. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.